Working with sheet goods definitely has its advantages. The material is extremely stable and won't expand and contract as the weather changes. It can speed up your work by not having to edge glue panels to make up a big side of like an entertainment center. And it can also save you some money. But part of the downside is the material is extremely heavy and awkward and can be easily damaged on the edges and mess up the veneer. We're going to show you a couple simple tips to make that process easier and more successful. If you're going to handle sheet goods, one thing that I highly recommend to save your back is a panel carrier. This one I really like because it folds up and I can shove it in my pocket or under the seat of my truck. But simply unfold it, hook it under the sheet, and now I'm good to go. One of the things that I try to do is keep the amount of sheet goods I have stored in my shop to a minimum. They just take up space and you're going to get damaged edges. So what I do is I make a cutting diagram of all my sheets with some rough dimensions, and then I head to the home center. I buy just what I need, and when I come home, I start breaking it down with a circular saw. Why a circular saw? Well, handling a 4x8 sheet across a table saw can be very dangerous. It can lead to kickbacks, damaged materials. Even if you do have all the proper infeed and outfeed support, there are better ways to do it. So let's take a look. When I break down a sheet, I do it on the shop floor. I set a piece of 2-inch foam insulation down and then throw my sheet right on top of it. That way when I make my cuts, I'm fully supported underneath every inch of the sheet. Then I measure the diagonal corners of the sheet just to verify that everything is square. Now, lay out your cuts. Make sure you mark both ends to reference when you set up your straight edge. With many clamp-on tool guides, I have to account for the distance between the edge of the saw and the edge of the blade, and sometimes that can be tricky to measure. I like this one that's custom fit to my saw that I line up with the mark with the edge of my guide, and now the edge of my blade is going to cut right on that mark, and it'll leave me a nice clean edge. So now I'll set up my guide, aligning it with the mark on one end, and clamp it. Now I can clamp it because my foam is actually cut about 4 inches smaller than a piece of plywood. That way I have clamping clearance underneath the sheet. Line up the second end and make the cut. I just repeat this process to further break down the sheet until I'm ready to go to the table saw. Now that I've broken down the sheet into manageable sizes that I can handle on the table saw, I want to talk about some safety operations at this machine. As with any power tool operations, make sure you're wearing hearing and eye protection. The saw comes with a splitter. Please use it. It'll help prevent binding and kickback. Also, I want to talk about our outfeed table. This is nice and wide and provides plenty of support. One of the things I don't want to have is to run a wide piece through and have a narrow outfeed support that will only support half of it, and then the other half falls on the floor or gets caught in the saw. When handling longer stock, I don't want to approach a running saw with my material. I want to use an infeed support stand. That way I can position the stock where I want it, fire up the saw, and make the cut. Earlier I cut this sheet to about 12 inches wide. My final width will be narrower than that. So first I run my factory edge against the fence and make one parallel trimming cut. Now I'll flip the board end for end, adjust my fence to the sheet's final dimension, and clean up the second edge. Cross-cutting a piece like this on the table saw is too dangerous to do. There's a better and safer way. I can stack up multiple parts for the same part of my project, align all the edges flush, and then using my foam blocks and my cross-cut jig, along with clamps and the circular saw, I can trim them to their final length. By stacking, I know I have two identical parts. When cross-cutting, long and narrow work pieces, it's a good idea to use a cross-cutting panel sled. This one rides in the miter gauge and is trimmed to be flush with the saw. I mark my panel length, line it up with the end of my fence, and now when I cut it, it'll be right on the money. For more shop tips and wood jigs like these, check out Wood Magazine or visit us online at woodmagazine.com.